Now it's time to take our request and actually get the data and be able to share it globally. And for that, we're going to use something called React Context. So first of all, we have to import React and use state, create context, use effect, and use memo. And we're going to get that from React. All right. Now that we've imported what we needed, we also are going to import our restaurant request and restaurant transform, and we're going to do that from /restaurant service. Now we need to make sure that both of these are exported, and as we can see, our transform isn't being exported. Okay, so now that we're back in here, we can now see that we have everything we need to start creating our context. So first of all, we're going to export const the restaurant's context, and that's going to be create context. This is going to create a global context for us with React. And then we're going to export const restaurants context provider. And that's going to be the thing that wraps the app and provides it certain state. Now, what we need to do here is we're going to return a restaurant context dot provider, and that's going to be what's wrapping the app. And so at this point, you may be thinking, okay, what is it wrapping? Well, it's wrapping the children. So it's going to be wrapping whatever the children are. So we're going to grab children off of the props. And what we can see now is that, okay, with this basic concept, if we go to app, what we can do is we can say import restaurant context provider from /source /services /restaurant / and then we'll take the context. And what we'll do with this is we're going to wrap it before the navigation container, right? So at this level, we're going to put the restaurant context provider, and we're going to wrap it around the navigation container so that all of the navigation has access to the restaurants. And what we'll put on this context, first of all, is we're going to give it a value, and we're going to say value is equal to, and then we'll say restaurants, and then we'll say it's an empty array, right? We'll say it's an empty array. And so we'll put 1, 2, 3 in here. And what I want to make clear here is by setting up this context now, because we wrapped the app level consideration with the restaurant context provider, what we can do now is we can go inside our restaurant screen and we can import from React, use context. And with use context, what we're going to do here is we're going to say in our restaurant screen, return, we're going to open the function body. And by opening up the function body, what we can do is say const restaurant context is equal to use context. And so what we need to use here is we need to import the restaurant context, right? This one. We need to import this. So we're importing this from, and then we're going to go // services / restaurant / restaurant context. And by importing this, we can now put it in the use context, right? And by doing that, console.logging restaurant context, we should see our restaurants with the empty array value. So, okay, what we did here is we went into app.js and we wrapped it with the restaurant context provider that we created in restaurant context. So this is the provider of this context. And it returns the restaurant context dot provider, and it gives it an initial value of restaurants 1, 2, 3. So this is basically a component that's going to do the majority of the heavy lifting and then telling the context what it's going to contain as a value. And that value can be passed around along the tree below app.js. Below app.js, we can then go and say, okay, well, use context, the restaurant context. Anything below app.js now can use context of restaurant context. And if it console.logs.context, what we can see, actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and do this. Let's use it in the data, because right here we have all this mock data. So instead of doing this, let's go ahead and do restaurant.context.restaurants. And then we should see the amount of restaurants populate that we have set up. So if we reload this, what we're going to see is we have 3 restaurants here now. So it's using the array of the restaurant context right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we'll see 8 restaurants populate. So we know now that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 restaurants are being populated. So this array is now being used by this screen, right? By this screen as the data attribute. So the data attribute is coming from this. And if we console.log that, console.log restaurant context, and we open our terminal here, what we'll see inside of that restaurant context, if we scroll to the bottom, is that array of 1 to 8. Now, this is obviously not the data that we want to use, but we've just set up a context that will be able to provide any level below app.js with the context and the information. So in that context, that's where we're going to do our service call and store the restaurants that we get back, and then have that pass down. And then eventually we'll be able to load up all of San Francisco's data, and you'll see all of these restaurants change.